Welcome to the narrative Oasis. Have you ever experienced a moment so strange, so out of place, that it made you question reality itself? A flicker in the world around you, a conversation you swear you've had before, or an object appearing where it simply shouldn't be. They call these glitches in the Matrix, moments when the simulation we might be living in seems to crack, revealing something unsettling underneath. Tonight, we're diving deep into some of the most chilling and inexplicable glitch in the Matrix stories ever shared. These aren't just spooky tales. They're first-hand accounts that will make you look over your shoulder and wonder if what you're seeing is actually real. So, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to have your perception of reality shattered. If you enjoy stories that question everything, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the Narrative Oasis for more. Now, let's begin.
Story 1, The Third Shift. Hello, I'm Leo. For 6 years, my world was defined by the hum of machinery and the glow of emergency lights. I was the night security guard at the Mitchell Data Processing Center, a place that time had respectfully forgotten. It was a temple of old technology, cavernous building filled with towering racks of obsolete servers that chanted a constant, warm, electronic mantra. My job was a slow, deliberate dance with boredom. I walked the same polished linoleum halls every night, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I watched the same ghostly blue and green server lights blink in their endless rhythmic patterns. It was predictable, it was solitary, and honestly, I kind of liked it that way. But last winter, the predictable rhythm of my job shattered. The change wasn't sudden. It was a slow creep, a subtle infection of the uncanny into my routine. It started with the camera feeds. I'd be in my office, sipping lukewarm coffee, and I'd see a flicker on one of the monitors. A dark figure, just for a second, in room 1-B, a decommissioned server room on the far side of the building. I'd rewind the footage and there would be a shadowy form near the back wall. But every time I walked the long corridor to check, the room was empty. The air would be still, the dust undisturbed, except for one thing. The old office chair in the corner would be spinning, ever so slowly, as if someone had just pushed off from the desk. I told myself it was Draft's old wiring, my eyes playing tricks on me in the low light. Then the motion sensors in the East Wing began their own strange performance. These weren't random triggers. They would go off in a perfect, sequential line, starting from the far end of the hallway and moving methodically toward the central hub. Beep, pause, beep, pause, beep. It was exactly like someone was running, sprinting down the corridor at a full-out pace. I'd rush over, my heart pounding against my ribs, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, only to find nothing. The hallway would be utterly still, silent, and empty. The sequence would happen at the same time every night, 3:13 a.m., right down to the second. I started setting my watch by it. It was unnerving. But after a few weeks, even that became part of the building's strange new routine. The real climax, the thing that finally broke through my attempts at rationalization, was the old photocopier. It sat in the abandoned administration office on the second floor, a floor I was only required to check once a night. It was a beast of a machine, coated in a thick layer of dust, and it hadn't been plugged in for at least a decade. That's what I thought anyway. One night, as I was making my rounds, I heard a worry sound coming from the admin office. I pushed the door open, and there it was, the copier, powered on and humming, its green ready light glowing in the dark. As I watched, it whirred to life and spat a single sheet of paper into the output tray. My hand trembled as I picked it up. It wasn't a blank page. It was a photograph. grainy black and white image of the office I was standing in. Desks, the chairs, the filing cabinets all there, all empty. But the perspective was strange. It was taken from the viewpoint of someone standing in the middle of the room, looking toward the door. I was standing by the door. I checked the plug. The machine was impossibly unplugged. I took the paper, chalked it up to some residual electrical charge, and tried my best to forget about it. But the next night it happened again. Another picture of the empty office. Only this time, the photographer seemed to have moved. The perspective was a few feet closer to the photocopier. This became a nightly ritual of terror. Every night, the copier would produce a single image. Every night, the invisible photographer's perspective moved closer and closer to the machine itself. I documented it, laying the photos out in my office, watching the progression. The viewpoint crept across the dusty floor, night after night, until finally, it was as if the photographer was standing directly in front of the copier. I dreaded what the next image would be. My shift that final night felt different. The air was heavy, static. The usual hum of the server seemed louder, more insistent. At the usual time, I made my way to the admin office. The door was slightly ajar. The copier was humming. A single piece of paper sat waiting for me in the tray. My blood ran cold. I hesitated, my feet feeling like they were glued to the floor. Finally, I forced myself forward and picked up the page. It was the clearest picture yet. It was a crisp, perfect photo of the photocopier itself. And reflected in the dark, glassy surface of its scanner screen was a man. A man in a security guard's uniform sitting at the desk in the corner. His head was in his hands. It was me. But that was impossible. I was standing right there by the machine, holding the paper in my hand. I looked at the reflection on the real copier in front of me. It showed me, standing, looking horrified. But the photo in my hand showed me sitting at the desk. I dropped the paper and ran. I didn't clock out. I didn't grab my coat. I just ran out into the cold night and never went back. I never found out who or what was sitting at that desk. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more.
Story number 2, The Red Door Dream. My name is Sam, and for as long as I can remember, a dream has followed me. It's not a nightmare, not exactly. It's more of a persistent, quiet echo in the back of my mind. The dream is always the same. I find myself walking down a long, narrow corridor. The carpet underfoot is this ugly, unsettling moss green, the kind that seems to absorb all the light and sound. The walls are bare, and the only light comes from these dim, old-fashioned sconces that cast long, dancing shadows. At the very end of this hallway, there's a door, a single, glossy red door. It gleams under the weak light, a vibrant slash of color in an otherwise muted world. In the dream, I walk towards it, my steps muffled by the thick carpet. I always stop just short. My hand hovers over the doorknob, which is always cool and brass, but I never turn it. I never open the door. I just stand there, staring at it, with a feeling I can't quite name, a mix of curiosity and a deep, primal dread. Then I wake up. For years, it was just that. A weird quirk, a strange little movie my brain played on a loop. I'd mention it to friends, and we'd laugh about it. It was my red door dream. Nothing more. That all changed about 2 months ago. My cousin, Leo, had just moved into a new apartment building, one of those older high-rises with a bit of character. He was excited to show it off, so I went to visit. I took the elevator up to the 12th floor. The door slid open, and I stepped out. And then, everything stopped. My blood ran cold. I was standing in the hallway from my dream. It was identical. The same sickly green carpet, so specific I could feel its texture under my shoes. The same dim sconce lighting that made the air feel thick and heavy. And there, at the far end of the long corridor, was the door. Fire engine red, freshly painted and impossibly glossy. It was so real, so tangible. It stole the breath from my lungs. My heart started pounding against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden silence. I just stood there, staring, feeling like I was still asleep. Leo came out of his apartment, saw my face, and asked if I was okay. I pointed, my hand shaking. "That door," I managed to say. "What's behind that red door?" He just shrugged. "Oh, that? It's just a janitor's closet. It's been locked for as long as I've been here. The super said they lost the key ages ago." A janitor's closet. The explanation was so mundane, so boring, it felt almost like a joke. The coincidence was staggering, a 1 in a billion chance. But what else could it be? Just a strange, unsettling fluke. I tried to shake it off. I spent the afternoon helping Leo unpack. We ordered pizza, watched a movie. Life went on. But the image of that hallway, of that door, was burned into my mind. I couldn't let it go. Over the next few weeks, I found myself making excuses to visit Leo. I told him I wanted to help decorate, that I was just in the neighborhood. But really, I was investigating. Every time I stepped out of that elevator, I felt that same jolt of fear and familiarity. I started paying more attention to the building, to its residents. They were a strange bunch. There was an elderly woman on the same floor, Mrs. Gable. I saw her one afternoon struggling with her groceries and offered to help. As we walked down the hall, I casually brought up the red door. "It's funny," I said. "I have dreams about a door just like that." The friendly smile on her face vanished. She looked at the door, then back at me, her eyes clouded with something I couldn't read. "Some doors are best left unopened, dear," she whispered, patting my arm before scurrying into her apartment and locking the door behind her. Her reaction sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just a closet. She knew something. I tried asking the building's super, a gruff man named George. When I mentioned the door and the lost key, he cut me off. "It's a storage space. It's empty. End of story," he grumbled, refusing to make eye contact. It felt like a wall was going up every time I asked. The residents would exchange these quick, knowing glances in the elevator if they saw me looking down the hall. They knew. They all knew something about the red door, and their silence was more terrifying than any answer they could have given me. My investigation hit a dead end with the living, so I turned to the dead. I spent hours in the city archives, digging through old newspapers and building records, looking for anything about the building's history. It was built in the late 1950s, a luxury high-rise in its day. For weeks, I found nothing, just property deeds and architectural blueprints. But then, tucked away in a microfiche file of a local paper from 1968, I found it. A small article, a brief mention of a tragedy at the building. A man, a resident of apartment 12G, Leo's apartment, had vanished without a trace. His name was Arthur Finch. He was a musician, a recluse. One day, he was there, and the next, he was gone. The police found his apartment locked from the inside, his wallet and keys on the table. No signs of a struggle, no signs of him ever leaving. The article mentioned one peculiar detail. Neighbors reported hearing a strange, rhythmic tapping sound coming from his apartment in the days before he disappeared. The case went cold. He was never found. A tapping sound. The words seemed to leap off the page. The coincidence was too much. I felt a growing certainty that Arthur Finch's disappearance and the red door were connected. I was getting closer to an answer, but the closer I got, the more I felt like I was walking towards the edge of a cliff in the dark. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place last week. Leo was out of town for a few days, and he asked me to stay at his place to water his plants. I was hesitant, but my morbid curiosity won. I needed to be there, to be close to it. The first night was quiet, unnervingly so. I kept glancing down the hall at the red door, half expecting it to swing open. Nothing happened. I started to feel foolish, like I was letting my imagination run wild. Then came the second night. I woke up around 3 a.m., my throat dry. I got out of bed and walked into the hallway, heading for the kitchen. The apartment was completely dark, save for the faint orange glow of the city lights filtering through the window. As I passed the front door, I heard it. A faint knocking. It was soft, hesitant. My first thought was that it was someone at Leo's door. I froze, listening. But the sound wasn't coming from the hallway outside. It was coming from inside the apartment. My eyes darted around the dark space, and I realized where it was coming from. The linen closet. A small, unassuming closet in the short hallway leading to the bedroom. A closet I'd never even seen open. When Leo came back, I didn't tell him. How could I? He'd think I was crazy. I left his apartment that morning and promised myself I would never go back. I tried to forget. I tried to convince myself it was a stress-induced hallucination, a waking nightmare brought on by my obsession. But the memory of that sound, that heartbeat rhythm knocking from inside a locked closet, was branded into my mind. For a few days, there was nothing. The quiet was a relief. I started to believe I was safe, that I had left the whole terrifying episode behind me on the 12th floor. Which was now threatening to beat its way out of my chest. Knock, 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 knock. The sound echoed in the small room, a terrifying duet. I'm lying here now, in the dark, typing this out on my phone. The knocking hasn't stopped. It's been going for hours. I'm too scared to move, too scared to even breathe. Story number 3, The Unregistered Book. My name is Eris, and I'm a librarian here at the Grand Valley Public Library. If there's one thing we value above all else, it's order. Every book has its place, its number, its history logged in our system. We are the keepers of stories, yes, but we are also the keepers of an intricate, unyielding logic. That's why the book caused such a stir. It defied everything we stood for. It all started on a Monday morning. There it was, sitting on top of the recently returned cart. A thick, navy blue volume with a simple, stark title embossed in silver. A treatise on silent cities. The author's name, something like Alastair Finch or Finch Alastair, was one I could never quite remember. It felt slippery in my mind, like trying to hold on to a dream after waking. My colleague, Martha, was the first to process it. She has been here for 30 years and knows the Dewey Decimal System better than her own family tree. She picked it up, her brow furrowed. Eris, come look at this. I don't recognize it. The book felt heavy, solid, the kind of academic tome that looks profoundly boring but is probably full of fascinating details. I took it from her. The paper was high quality, the binding immaculate. Let's scan it, I said, expecting a simple error. A new acquisition not yet in the system, perhaps. I ran the barcode under the red laser. Beep. On the screen, the record for Mark Twain's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer appeared. But not just any copy. It was the record for a specific, tattered paperback we had discarded and logged as permanently withdrawn back in 1998. That's impossible, Martha breathed. We checked the system manually. No record of a treatise on silent cities. No author by that name. No publisher we could identify. It was a ghost. A phantom bound in blue cloth. We did the only thing we could. Following the title subject, we placed it in the nonfiction section under social sciences, nestled between urban planning and anthropology. We figured we'd deal with the mystery later. But the next Monday, there it was again. Same spot, top of the returns cart, looking as if a patron had just dropped it off. Martha and I exchanged a look. This was no longer a simple error. It was a puzzle. We repeated the process. Scanned it. Tom Sawyer, 1998. Reshelved it. The following Monday, it was back. And the Monday after that. It became a ritual, a strange, unspoken joke between the staff. The ghost book's here, someone would mutter, and we'd all glance at the cart. We started trying to get rid of it. First, we just put it in the back office, on a shelf reserved for damaged books awaiting repair. The next Monday morning, it was on the cart. We locked it in a supply closet. It reappeared. Our head librarian, Mr. Davies, a man for whom rules were a religion, decided to take definitive action. This is a fire hazard, an unregistered item. It has no place here. He instructed me to take it to the recycling dumpster out back. I did. I tossed the heavy volume into the large blue bin, heard it thud against the cardboard and paper within. It felt final. The next morning, Monday, I walked into the library, my coffee in hand, and my heart sank. There it was, sitting pristine on the recently returned cart, not a scuff or smudge on its navy cover. That's when the curiosity finally overwhelmed the professional protocol. The fear was there, a low hum beneath the surface, but the need to know was louder. During my lunch break, when the library was quiet, I took the book to a secluded corral in the back. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and silence. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. The title page was just as I remembered, a treatise on silent cities by an author whose name I still couldn't hold in my mind. The table of contents listed chapters on ghost towns, abandoned metropolises, forgotten settlements. Pripyat, Centralia, Bodhi. I flipped through the pages. It was a history of places that had been emptied, left to decay. The text was dry, academic, filled with dense paragraphs and stark, black and white photographs. Then, the strangeness inside the book began to reveal itself. Martha was the one who saw it first, a week later. We were examining it together in the break room, emboldened by our shared confusion. She was flipping through a chapter on a derelict mining town in Arizona when she gasped, dropping the book on the table. "Look," she whispered, her face pale. She pointed to a photograph of a dusty, abandoned general store. In the reflection on the grimy window, a faint image could be seen. It was Martha, standing at her station by the circulation desk, a look of profound sadness on her face. The photo in the book was dated 1934, but the Martha in the reflection was the Martha of today, wearing the same floral blouse she had on. After that, things escalated. The book wasn't just a recurring anomaly, it was becoming personal, malicious even. Kevin, a young part-time page, found a photo in a chapter about a forgotten coastal village. In the background of a picture showing beached, rotting fishing boats, there was a small figure. It was him. He was lying on the ground, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. 2 weeks later, Kevin slipped on a wet floor near the entrance and broke his ankle in 2 places. The book became a source of pure dread. We stopped trying to throw it away. We were too scared. We just quietly took it from the cart each Monday and hid it, hoping our fear would somehow placate whatever force was at play. But it always came back. And with each return, the photos inside became more specific, more ominous. They were no longer just reflections or background figures. They were clear, undeniable portraits of us, the library staff, woven into the history of these silent cities. A picture of Mr. Davies appeared, his face superimposed over the empty window of a crumbling asylum. He retired a month later, citing sudden, severe health problems. I tried to avoid the book. I told myself it was a mass delusion, a prank, anything but what it seemed to be. But I knew. We all knew. This thing was a parasite, feeding on our lives, showing us glimpses of futures or pasts that were inescapable. Finally, my own curiosity, the very trait that makes a good librarian, became my undoing. It was a cold Tuesday night. The library was empty. The only sounds the hum of the fluorescent lights and the ticking of the grand clock in the main hall. I was closing up. The book was in on the cart. It was in a Monday, but I knew where Martha had hidden it this week. In the oversized map drawer, beneath a 19th century map of the county. My heart pounded against my ribs. I had to look. I had to know what it had in store for me. I pulled out the heavy drawer and there it was. I took it to my desk, the navy cover feeling cold as ice. I opened it to a random page. It was a chapter on a drowned town called Clearwater, a place submerged by a dam project in the 50s. And there, on the glossy page, was a photograph of the town's main street before the flood. I recognized the layout from old county records. In the window of the general store, clear as day, was my reflection. It wasn't faint. It wasn't in the background. It was me, staring out from the past, wearing the exact same gray sweater I had on that very day. My face was a mask of confusion and fear. The caption below the photograph read, "Main Street, Clearwater, 1952. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air crept down my spine. I slammed the book shut, my breath catching in my throat. This was impossible. It had to be. I pushed the book away, my hands shaking. I tried to rationalize, to find a logical explanation, but there was none. I sat there for a long time, trying to calm my racing heart. I decided I would burn it. I would take it home and throw it in the fireplace. I didn't care if it came back. I had to do something. I had to fight back. Just as I reached for it, determined, the book fell open on its own. It landed on the very last page. It wasn't a chapter on a silent city. There was just one final photograph. It took me a moment to understand what I was seeing. The picture was taken from a high angle, looking down. It showed the main desk of the Grand Valley Public Library. My desk. And there I was, sitting in my chair, my back to the camera. The desk lamp cast a pool of light on the open book in front of me. The metadata printed in the corner of the page, small and sharp, was a timestamp. It was tonight's date, and the time was 1 minute from now. I froze, the blood draining from my face. I could hear the echo of my own heartbeat in the vast, silent room. The photo was taken from behind me. From somewhere up high? I slowly, so slowly, lifted my head, my eyes drawn upward, toward the shadows of the second-floor stacks that overlooked my desk. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to see who, or what, had taken the picture. Thank you for joining me in the stacks. If this tale has you checking the books on your own shelf, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel for your weekly dose of the uncanny.
Story number 4. The Repeating Neighbor. You can call me Maya. I live on a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of street where the biggest news is usually a new flower bed or a lost cat. My morning ritual is my anchor to the real world, a strong cup of coffee on my front porch, watching the neighborhood wake up at 7:15 a.m. without fail. My neighbor, Mr. Henderson, shuffles past my house, walking his ancient dachshund, Felix. It was part of the background noise of my life, as reliable as the sunrise. That's why, 2 weeks ago, when things started to change, it felt less like a mystery and more like my brain was short-circuiting. It was a Tuesday. Mr. Henderson and Felix passed by at 7:15, right on schedule. I gave my usual little wave. He gave his usual tight-lipped smile. Felix, bless his old heart, waddled with the determination of a dog half his age. I went back to my coffee, scrolling through my phone, catching up on headlines. Maybe 5 minutes passed, then I heard it again. The distinctive click-clack of a dog's long nails on the pavement, accompanied by the slow, shuffling gait of its owner. I looked up from my phone, annoyed. I thought maybe they'd forgotten something and turned back. But no, Mr. Henderson and Felix were passing my house again, coming from the exact same direction, walking at the exact same pace. It was identical. The same blue windbreaker on him, the same tired look on Felix. I blinked. took another sip of coffee, and chalked it up to a weird morning. Maybe I'd just zoned out and imagined the first pass by. It happens, right? The next day, it happened again. 7:15, the first pass. 7:20 the second, and then, at 7:25, a third. 3 times. By the third loop, my heart was hammering against my ribs. It wasn't a coincidence. This was wrong. I stood up, walked to the edge of my porch. "Mr. Henderson," I called out. "Everything okay?" He didn't even turn his head. He just kept shuffling forward. That same strained smile plastered on his face, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Felix didn't even twitch an ear in my direction. They turned the corner at the end of the street and vanished. Now, it's a daily horror. What started as a weird glitch has become a terrifying looping spectacle. The repetitions increase each day. Yesterday, it was 4. Today, 5. Each time they pass, it's a perfect replica of the last. The same shuffle, the same click-clack of Felix's nails. He always smiles that same tight smile. Felix always stops to bark once, a single, sharp yip, at the fire hydrant across the street. It's like watching a corrupted video file playing over and over. I've tried everything to break the loop. The day after I first tried calling out to him, I decided to be more direct. On the second pass, I walked down my driveway and stood right in his path. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice firmer this time. "Are you all right?" It was like I wasn't there. He and Felix simply phased around me. Not through me, but they adjusted their path in a smooth, unnatural arc to avoid me without ever acknowledging my existence, and then continued on their way. It was the most unsettling thing I've ever experienced. I felt invisible, powerless. I thought, maybe I'm going crazy. Maybe this is some kind of stress-induced hallucination. So I tried to get a witness. My other neighbor, Mrs. Gable from across the street, also has her coffee on the porch. I timed it perfectly. The next morning, I saw her outside and went over, cup in hand, trying to act casual. "Morning, Carol," I said. "Bit of a strange one today, huh? Have you seen Mr. Henderson? Seems to be getting a lot of exercise in." She just looked at me, confused. "Oh, I saw him earlier," she said, glancing at her watch. "Right around 7:15, like always." "Why?" My blood ran cold. "You didn't see him pass by again?" "Just a few minutes ago," I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She shook her head, giving me a look that was a mixture of pity and concern. "No, dear, just the once. Are you feeling all right?" I mumbled something about not getting enough sleep and retreated back to my house, the walls suddenly feeling like they were closing in. No one else sees it. It's just for me. This knowledge is almost worse than the event itself. Am I the audience for this private, looping hell? Why me? I started documenting it, taking videos on my phone. But when I play them back, it's just me, filming an empty street. On the screen, there's no sign of Mr. Henderson or Felix. There's just the quiet cul-de-sac, the rising sun, and the sound of my own ragged breathing. But yesterday, everything changed. It was the 5th loop of the morning. I was standing on my porch, numb, just watching it happen. He passed by, the same tight smile. Felix barked at the hydrant. But as they drew level with my house, something was different. Mr. Henderson's smile vanished. It didn't just fade. It was wiped clean from his face, replaced by a mask of pure, animal terror. His eyes, which were always pointed straight ahead, suddenly snapped to the side and locked onto mine. They were wide, frantic, and filled with a desperation so profound it stole the air from my lungs. He didn't speak, he just kept shuffling forward, pulled along by some unseen force. But as he passed, he mouthed 2 words, slowly and clearly, making sure I understood. "Help me." And then he was gone, turning the corner. A moment later, the sound started again, the click-clack, the shuffle, the beginning of the 6th loop. Today, I didn't wait on the porch. I couldn't. His silent plea echoed in my mind all night. As soon as I heard the first shuffle at 7:15, I grabbed my keys and slipped out my front door. My plan was simple, desperate, and probably stupid. I was going to follow them. I had to see where they went when they turned that corner. I stayed a good distance behind, using the parked cars for cover. They moved at their usual unhurried pace. My heart pounded with every step. I felt like a trespasser in a world that wasn't meant for me. They reached the end of the block, the corner where they always disappeared. Mr. Henderson didn't look back. He and Felix turned the corner, and for a second, there was silence. I ran. I sprinted to the corner, my sneakers silent on the asphalt. I peered around the edge, my breath caught in my throat. The street beyond was completely empty. There was nowhere they could have gone so fast. No open doors, no cars pulling away. They had just vanished, defeated. I turned back to walk home, my mind reeling. And that's when I saw him, not down the street where he should have been, but at the very start of my own block, right where the loop always began. He wasn't walking. He was just standing there alone. Felix was gone. Mr. Henderson was staring directly at me, his face no longer a mask of terror, but one of pleading, of resignation. And as I met his gaze from across the street, he slowly, deliberately, began to shuffle forward. He had turned the corner and immediately appeared at the start of the street again. But this time, I wasn't just the audience. This time, he was looking right at me. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my very soul, that I was now part of the loop, too. Thank you for listening. If you'll be watching your neighbors a little closer tomorrow, show your support with a like. And subscribe to the channel for more stories that twist the everyday into something terrifying. Story number 5, The Infinite Stretch. My name is David, and I've always found a unique kind of peace on long drives. There is something about the hum of the engine and the ribbon of road unfurling before you that just stills the mind. At least it used to. That all ended on Route 142. If you know the area, you know the road. It's a 20-mile straight shot, cutting right through an endless expanse of pine forest. No exits, no turnoffs, just a dark, lonely stretch of asphalt. It was late, probably pushing midnight, and the world outside my car was a solid wall of black, broken only by the reach of my headlights. The trees stood like silent, towering sentinels on either side. It was then that I saw it. Up ahead, on the shoulder, a set of hazard lights blinked in a steady, hypnotic rhythm. As I got closer, the shape resolved into a rusted blue pickup truck, the kind that looks like it's seen more hard miles than a dozen new cars combined. A man stood beside it, his figure silhouetted against the flashing lights. He was wearing a plaid jacket, hands shoved deep into his pockets, just staring out into the woods. My first thought was, he probably needs help. But it was late. This road was notorious, and a little prickle of caution ran down my spine. We've all heard the stories. So, I did what most people would do. I kept a firm grip on the wheel, eased a little to the left, and drove past him. I glanced in my rearview mirror. The blinking lights and the solitary figure grew smaller and smaller until the darkness swallowed them completely. I breathed a sigh of relief, turning my music up just a little louder. About 10 minutes passed. The road was still dead straight, the scenery unchanging. Pine trees and more pine trees. And then, I saw them again. Blinking orange lights, cutting through the night. My stomach tightened. It couldn't be. As I drew closer, my disbelief curdled into a cold dread. It was the same truck, a rusted, dented blue pickup. And standing right beside it, in the exact same stance, was the same man in the same plaid jacket. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Did he somehow get ahead of me? Impossible. There were no turns, no secret shortcuts. I hadn't stopped this time. I didn't ease past. I sped up. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, and my knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I told myself it was a coincidence. 2 identical old trucks. 2 guys with a fondness for plaid jackets. It was a stretch, but it was better than the alternative. I glued my eyes to the road ahead, pushing the car faster, willing the miles to pass. I started watching the odometer, a desperate need for tangible proof that I was making progress, that I was moving forward. 5 miles clicked by, then 10. The counter confirmed it. I had driven 10 clear miles since the last sighting. I should be almost at the end of this cursed road, and there it was again. The blue pickup, the blinking lights, the man. It was like a scene from a nightmare, replaying on a loop. This time, I noticed something new. A faded bumper sticker on the back of the truck that read "Go Fish." I hadn't seen that before, or maybe I just hadn't noticed. The man was still there, a statue of quiet desperation. Panic, cold and sharp, began to flood my system. I was trapped. I was caught in some kind of impossible repeating glitch in reality. I tried my phone, no signal, not a single bar. I fumbled with the GPS, hoping it might offer some kind of escape route, some sign of a different road. The screen just showed my little car icon, sitting stubbornly in the middle of that single, straight line of Route 142. It was mocking me. The map was as trapped as I was. On the 4th pass, the truck had a flat tire on the passenger side. On the 5th, the driver's side door was hanging open, creaking slightly in the wind I was creating as I flew past. Each loop, some small detail was different, twisted just enough to make it worse, to confirm that this wasn't just my imagination. This was real. It was happening. By the 6th time I saw the truck, the panic had boiled over into a strange, reckless anger. The fear was still there, a cold stone in my gut, but it was now wrapped in a layer of pure frustration. Who was this guy? What did he want? Was this some kind of sick joke? On the seventh pass, something inside me snapped. I couldn't just keep driving. I couldn't spend eternity on this 20-mile stretch of hell. With a scream that was torn from my throat, I slammed on my brakes. The tires shrieked in protest, and my car skidded to a halt just a few yards behind the pickup. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic click-clack of the hazard lights and the frantic thumping of my own heart. I threw the door open, my legs shaking as I got out. The night air was cold, smelling of pine and damp earth. "What is this?" I yelled, my voice cracking. "What do you want from me?" The man didn't move for a long moment. Then, with an agonizing slowness, he began to turn around. My breath caught in my throat. I expected to see a monster, a ghost, some kind of unholy creature. But the face that turned to meet mine was terrifying for a completely different reason. It wasn't a stranger. It was me, an older version of me. The face was mine, but it was etched with lines of exhaustion and terror I'd never known. His eyes were wide with a deep-settled fear, as if he'd been staring into an abyss for a lifetime. He looked weathered, haunted. He didn't speak. He just raised a trembling, bony hand and pointed. Not at me, not at the truck. He pointed back down the road I'd just come from. My eyes followed his finger, back into the darkness, and then I saw it, a pair of headlights approaching. My stomach plunged. A car was coming, moving fast. As it entered the pool of light cast by my own headlights and the blinking hazards, I saw it clearly. It was my car, my exact car, and behind the wheel, I could see myself. My own face, younger, untouched by the horror of the last hour, was pale with the first flicker of dread as I drove past this bizarre scene on the side of the road. I stood there, frozen, watching myself drive into the very trap I was now caught in. Then, another set of headlights appeared behind that one, and another. The quiet road was no longer empty. A traffic jam was forming, a long line of my own car, stretching back into the darkness. In each one, a version of me was behind the wheel, each at a different stage of terror. The dawning confusion, the growing panic, the frantic anger, the final soul-crushing despair. I was looking at a procession of my own damnation. And the oldest me, the man from the truck, finally lowered his arm. He looked at me, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek, and he whispered, his voice a dry rasp, "Welcome to the roadblock. Thank you for riding along. If Route 142 is now on your list of places to avoid, please like this video. For more journeys into the inexplicable, hit that subscribe button." Story number 6. The Progressive Polaroid. My name is Chloe. For the past 3 years I've worked at a cozy little coffee shop called The Daily Grind. It's the kind of place with mismatched armchairs, the smell of roasted beans hanging heavy in the air, and a big cork bulletin board plastered with local flyers, business cards, and lost pet posters. It's my little corner of the world, predictable and safe. Or at least, it was. It all started on a Tuesday. I was wiping down the counter after the morning rush when something new on the bulletin board caught my eye. Pinned right in the center was a Polaroid photo. It was a picture of our counter, the gleaming espresso machine in the background, and me. I was in the photo, mid-action, handing a latte to a customer. My smile was genuine, the kind I reserve for our regulars. It was a little eerie, seeing a moment I didn't remember being captured, but I figured it was just a customer with an old-school camera who thought it was a charming scene. I smiled, unpinned it, and tucked it into my apron pocket. A sweet little keepsake. The next day, Wednesday, it was back. The exact same spot on the board. I stared at it, a prickle of unease crawling up my spine. It wasn't the same photo. It was the same scene, the same angle, but a split second later. In this one, my smile was gone. I had a slight frown, a look of confusion on my face as I stared at the customer themselves. They were a little less clear in this one. Still just a shape, but a bit fuzzier around the edges. I took it down again, my hand trembling slightly. This wasn't sweet anymore. This was weird. I scanned the coffee shop, my eyes lingering on each customer. Was it one of them? Was this some kind of prank? Thursday, the photo was there again. This time my confusion had twisted into fear. My eyes were wide in the picture, my hand still holding the latte, but my body was angled away from the customer, who was now just a blurry silhouette. My shift that day was agonizing. Every time the bell over the door chimed, my head would snap up. I started watching the regulars. There was Mr. Henderson, the quiet old man who always reads the newspaper in the corner. Could he be this stealthy? What about Maya, the freelance writer who's always typing furiously on her laptop? She has a dozen tote bags. She could easily have a camera in one. My paranoia started to build a wall around me. The familiar comfort of the daily grind was cracking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I fell down a rabbit hole of internet forums about vintage Polaroid cameras. I learned about the different models, the types of film, the chemical processes. I read stories about spirit photography, old Victorian hoaxes where photographers would superimpose ghostly figures into portraits. But this felt different. This felt real. The forums talked about rare modified cameras, experimental models that were rumored to do impossible things. One post mentioned a camera that didn't just capture a moment, but influenced it. The idea was so absurd I almost laughed. But the seed of a terrifying thought had been planted. Friday's photo was worse. In it, I wasn't serving coffee anymore. I was pointing a shaking finger at the bulletin board itself. My mouth was open in a silent scream. The customer, the blurry silhouette, was still there at the counter, but they seemed closer, darker. The shop was empty behind us. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this scene hadn't happened yet. These weren't records of the past. They were a script for the future. My future. That day I tried to fight it. I consciously avoided looking at the bulletin board. I made my co-worker Ben handle any customers who looked even remotely like the silhouette. I forced smiles. I tried to act normal, but the image was burned into my mind. Around closing time, when the shop was empty, I was tidying up. My eyes, against my will, drifted to the board, and a scream tore from my throat. I wasn't screaming because of the photo. I was screaming because I had just recreated it. My own finger was pointing at the board, my mouth agape. The photo had made it happen. My seeing the photo was the trigger. The realization hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't a prediction. It was a cause. Each photo's event happened because I had seen the one before it. My fear, my reactions, they were all being orchestrated by these little white-bordered squares. Someone wasn't just taking photos of me. They were directing me. They were playing with me. This wasn't a prank. It was a trap, and I was the rat in the maze, running exactly where they wanted me to. My research into the cameras came flooding back. The camera didn't influence the moment. My knowledge of the photo did. I was the one making it real. Saturday I arrived an hour before my shift, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock the door. I had to see the next photo. I had to know what was coming. It was there, waiting for me. This one was the most horrific yet. In the photo, I was behind the counter, my face streaked with tears, my body cowering, and the blurred silhouette of the customer was reaching across the counter. Not for the coffee I was no longer holding, but for me. Their hand was an indistinct blur, reaching, and pinned to the jacket of this shadowy figure, just barely visible, was a small metallic glint, a badge. My blood ran cold. A badge. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. All day, I was a wreck. Every customer was a potential threat. I jumped at every shadow, flinched at every sudden movement. The friendly chime of the door became a sound of pure dread. My regulars noticed. "Chloe, are you all right?" Mrs. Gable asked, her kind face filled with concern. I could only manage a weak, unconvincing nod. How could I explain? How could I tell them that I was trapped in a nightmare orchestrated by a Polaroid camera? They'd think I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. Then, about an hour before closing, the bell chimed. A man I'd never seen before walked in. He was tall, with a kind, unassuming face. He walked right up to the counter. "Slow day?" he asked with a friendly smile. I just stared at him, my throat tight. He was wearing a dark jacket. He ordered a black coffee. As I turned to make it, my hands rattling the ceramic mug, he spoke again. "The name's Officer Davies," he said, holding up his identification. "Just doing a routine check on the local businesses. We've had a few odd reports in the area." He pointed to the pin on his jacket, a badge, the glint, the exact same glint from the photograph. Time seemed to slow down. The hum of the refrigerator, the drip of a faucet, the distant traffic, it all faded into a roaring in my ears. This was him, the silhouette, the man from the photos. He was introducing himself, just a friendly officer on his beat. But the final photo flashed in my mind. Me crying, him reaching for me. He was still smiling, waiting for his coffee, but his eyes held a look I couldn't place. It wasn't kindness, it was anticipation. He knew. He had the camera. He was the one leaving the photos. He had been leading me to this exact moment. The photo didn't show what happened next. It only showed the beginning, the reach. I'm standing here now, the hot coffee pot in my hand, looking at the man who has been terrorizing me one Polaroid at a time. The final picture is about to develop, and I have no idea if I can change the ending. Thank you for listening. If you'll be double-checking every photo you're in, give this story a like. Subscribe to the channel for more glimpses into a world that's not quite right. Story number 7. The Sound of Locks. I'm Ben, my neighbor across the hall. Frank is a quiet, elderly man, lives alone as far as I can tell. He has this thing with his front door. It's fitted with 3 heavy-duty industrial-looking locks. Every single day, I hear the ritual. It's a sound that's burned itself into my brain. Click, 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 a precise, rhythmic sequence. Then a pause, a moment of absolute silence, before the final, heavier sound of the door opening or closing. It's become the soundtrack to my life in this building. The morning clicks tell me it's time to get ready for work. The evening clicks signal that the day is over. It's a strange kind of comfort, this predictable metallic punctuation to my day. I've never thought much of it, beyond a fleeting thought that Frank must be a very cautious man. Maybe he's had a bad experience, a break-in in the past. Who was I to judge? In a city like this, you can never be too careful. Last Thursday, the city was drenched in a cold, persistent rain, the kind that seeps into your bones. I had woken up with a fever and a throat that felt like sandpaper, so I called in sick. I spent most of the day on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, drifting in and out of a groggy, feverish sleep. The apartment was eerily quiet, save for the rhythmic drumming of rain against the windowpane. Around mid-afternoon, just as the gray light outside was beginning to fade, I heard it, the familiar sound from across the hall. Click, click, click. The sound was as sharp and clear as ever. I waited for the usual follow-up, the groan of Frank's door opening, but it never came. Instead, something else happened, something that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. My own doorknob, the one to my apartment, began to jiggle. Not a gentle turn, but a violent, frantic rattling, as if someone was desperately trying to get in. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze on the couch, every muscle tensed. Who would be trying to force their way into my apartment in the middle of the afternoon? The rattling stopped as suddenly as it began, plunging the apartment back into a deafening silence. And then, my phone, which was lying on the cushion next to me, buzzed a text message. My hand trembled as I picked it up. The notification on the screen made my blood run cold. The message was from my own number. My own name was displayed at the top. I unlocked the screen, my thumb slipping on the glass. The message was just 6 words. 6 words that made no sense but filled me with a primal, suffocating fear. It read, "Don't let him know you heard." I nearly dropped the phone. What did that mean? Let who know? Let him know I heard what? The clicks, the jiggling doorknob. My mind was a vortex of confusion and panic. I crept off the couch, my bare feet silent on the wooden floor. I peered through the peephole of my front door. The hallway was empty. The dim, flickering fluorescent light cast long, distorted shadows. Frank's door was closed, impassive. It looked exactly as it always did. Was this a prank, a sick joke? But who would know my number, and how could they text me from it? I tried to call the police. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 attempts to dial the number. The call wouldn't connect. Call failed. My screen read, over and over. I tried calling my mom, my best friend. Nothing. No service. But I had service just moments ago. I'd received a text. My Wi-Fi was down. 2. I was completely cut off. The feeling of isolation was a physical weight, pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I was trapped. Then I heard it again. The sound that started it all, click, click, click. But this time it wasn't coming from the hallway. It was closer, much closer. It was coming from inside my apartment. My head snapped towards the sound. It was coming from my bathroom. I stared at the closed bathroom door, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The sound came again, methodical, patient, click, click, click. It was the sound of the lock on the inside of the bathroom door being tested, turned, unlocked. I scrambled backwards, my back hitting the wall with a thud. My own phone buzzed again in my hand. Another text from myself. He's inside. He's learning. Learning what? My locks. The thought was insane. But as the clicks from the bathroom continued, a horrifying understanding began to dawn. This thing, whatever it wasn't just trying to get in. It was mapping my home, understanding its defenses. I didn't think, I just ran. I lunged for my bedroom, slammed the door shut, and fumbled with the cheap lock on the knob. It felt flimsy, pathetic. I shoved my dresser against the door, the wood scraping loudly against the floor. I was panting, sweat pouring down my face despite the feverish chills racking my body. My bedroom was my last fortress, my little island in a sea of encroaching dread. The clicks stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. It was a listening silence, a waiting silence. My phone buzzed. Bad move. Now he knows where you are. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone against the wall, but I couldn't. It was my only connection to whatever this was, this twisted narrator of my own horror story. Then the sounds started again, but they were different now. They weren't coming from one place anymore. They were everywhere. A soft click from the latch on my bedroom window. A moment later, another click, this one from the closet door. It was a symphony of terror, played on the very mechanisms I relied on for safety. Click, the vent cover above my bed. Click, the clasp on my old laptop. It was exploring, testing, learning every single lock, latch, and clasp in my apartment. It was methodical, tireless, and it was getting closer. I sat huddled on my bed, knees pulled to my chest, my gaze darting around the room, trying to anticipate the next sound. I felt like a mouse in a maze, with a predator that could rewrite the walls. The texts kept coming, each one a new spike of fear. Like the lock on your grandmother's old jewelry box, very intricate. He's disappointed in your window locks. Too simple. It was taunting me, playing with me. The messages weren't just warnings anymore. They were a running commentary from the monster in my home. I started to think about Frank. Quiet, elderly Frank. Was he okay? Did this thing get him, or was Frank something else? Was that quiet old man just a disguise, a shell? My mind reeled. The clicks across the hall, they weren't about keeping people out. They were about practice. The 3 heavy-duty locks weren't for his security. They were a training ground, a puzzle box for this thing to solve, day after day, until it had perfected its craft. And now, it had graduated. It had moved across the hall to a new set of puzzles. My apartment, my life. The clicking from the bedroom door started. Not the knob, but the dresser I'd pushed against it. Click, a drawer latch. Click, the metal joint of a folding hinge I'd forgotten was even there. It was disassembling my barricade, piece by piece, with sound alone. The dresser shuddered slightly. It was learning how to unmake it. The final text came through about an hour ago. I've been staring at it ever since. The words burned into my retinas. The light from the screen is the only light in the room. I don't dare turn on a lamp. I don't dare make a sound. The clicks have stopped. It's utterly silent again. The waiting silence. I read the message for the 100th time. It's from my number. It's from me, but the words are not mine. The words are his. He thinks you're in here with him. Thank you for listening. If you're now second-guessing every sound in your home, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss our next story from the edge of reality. Story number 8. The Clock with 2 Pens. Hey, I'm Kira. After my grandmother died, I inherited her beautiful pendulum wall clock. It never worked for me. Then, one night at 3:03 a.m., it started, but the rhythm was wrong. Tick, tick, tock, a double beat, then a pause. The next day the world felt out of sync. My reflection in the microwave blinked a moment after I did. My voice on a recording came back a syllable late. I finally understood when I watched a digital clock and the wall clock together. The wall clock was faster, creating a gap between its reality and mine. And last night, in that gap, I saw something. When I turned my head quickly, I'd glimpsed my living room, but darker, empty, and in the corner of that other room, something would be sitting in my chair, its head tilted, listening to the tick-tick-tock from its side. Thank you for listening. Subscribe for more.
And that brings us to the end of another tale from the Oasis. We hope you enjoyed this journey into the extraordinary. Here at Narrative Oasis, we're dedicated to bringing you the most captivating stories for your pleasure. And trust me, the adventure is far from over. There are many more tales waiting to be told. If you're hungry for more thrills and excitement right now, be sure to check out our previous video. You won't be disappointed. To make sure you don't miss what's coming next, hit that like button, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel to stay connected. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next story.